In small towns, silence is currency. Everyone knows everyone. And the truth, when it threatens power, is often buried deeper than the dead. This story begins on a quiet street where nothing ever made the news. Until it did. People barely noticed Eli Carter. He stocked shelves at the local hardware store, walked home at dusk, and lived with his mother in a house that leaned slightly to the left, like it was tired of standing. Eli wasn't dumb, he was careful. But in a town that worshipped appearances, careful looked a lot like invisible. And then there was Victor Howell, mayor philanthropist, the man whose last name was etched on the school gym, the library, and half the town's pride. Victor Hale shook hands like he owned the future. And maybe, in that town, he did. The night everything changed began with a storm. Rain hammered the roads, turning the river into a roaring brown ribbon. Eli was closing the hardware store when he heard the sirens. Too many, too fast. He watched police cars race past, lights bouncing off puddles like broken promises. By morning, the town was buzzing. A teenage girl named Lena Brooks was missing. Lena had been the kind of kid who asked hard questions in class. The kind who didn't lower her eyes when powerful men spoke. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father had left years earlier. When the sheriff announced that Lena had likely run away, people nodded. It was easier that way. Everyone nodded except Eli, because Eli had seen something. The night of the storm, as he locked up the store, he noticed a black SUV parked behind City Hall, engine running, no lights. He remembered it because it didn't belong there and because the driver looked panicked. When the vehicle sped off, Eli caught a glimpse of the license plate. Not the whole thing, just enough. At first he said nothing. Who would listen to him? A shell stalker accusing the mayor's family? Victor Hale's son, Ryan, drove a black SUV. Everyone knew that too. Ryan was reckless, untouchable, always smiling like consequences were for other people. Days passed. Flyer peeled off telephone poles. The river was searched. The sheriff held press conferences full of soft words and empty reassurances. And then, just like that, the search slowed. That's when Eli made a choice. He went to the police station with what he knew. The partial plate, the time, the place, the look on the driver's face. The deputy barely looked up. You sure you didn't imagine it? He asked Dot. When Eli insisted, the room went quiet. A door opened. Another officer whispered, and then the sheriff himself appeared, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Go home, son, he said gently. Let us handle this. The next day, Eli was fired. No explanation, just a box of his things and a warning look from his boss. That night, someone spray-painted LIAR across his front fence. The message was clear, but so was the truth. Eli started keeping notes, times, names, patterns. He noticed how certain businesses suddenly put up support the Hales banners, how Lena's mother stopped being invited to church events, how the town closed ranks, pretending grief was the same thing as justice. Then came the break. A local journalist from outside the county, Marissa Cole, reached out after seeing a single comment Eli left online. Careful, vague but persistent. They met in a diner 2 towns over. Eli told her everything. For the first time, someone listened. Marissa dug where local reporters wouldn't. Found sealed traffic camera footage from the night of the storm, footage that had been marked corrupted. She found a repair order for a black SUV, rushed through at a shop owned by one of Victor Hale's donors, and she found a voicemail Lena had left a friend hours before she disappeared. He thinks his last name protects him, Lena said in the recording. If anything happens to me, the message cut off. When the story broke, it hit like an earthquake. National outlets picked it up. Protesters filled the square. Questions flooded the sheriff's office. Victor Hale stood at a podium, face pale, voice steady, insisting on his family's innocence. He called Eli a disgruntled employee, a nobody chasing attention. But power shifts don't always announce themselves. They creep. A former deputy came forward, then a city clerk, then a mechanic who couldn't sleep anymore. Each confession cracked the wall a little more. The corrupted footage was restored. The partial plate Eli remembered matched Ryan Hale's SUV exactly. Ryan was arrested quietly, at night, no cameras allowed. The town woke up to a new reality. Lena's body was never shown. Her story didn't need spectacle. What mattered was the truth. She had been silenced, and a town had helped do it by looking away. Eli stood at the edge of the crowd as charges were announced. No one cheered. Some cried. Others stared at the ground, ashamed. The sheriff resigned. Victor Hale disappeared from public view, his legacy unraveling in real time. Marissa asked Eli if he felt like a hero. He shook his head. I just didn't want to be quiet anymore. Justice, when it finally came, felt less like victory and more like air returning to a room that had been sealed too long. But this isn't where the story ends. Because as investigators dug deeper, they found something else, older files, older silences, and names that hadn't been spoken in years. Lena wasn't the first, and Victor Hale's reach may have gone further than anyone imagined. How many truths were buried before? Eli Cartel refused to stay invisible. The town told itself the nightmare was over, that Ryan Hale's arrest had scrubbed the blood from the streets and washed the guilt from their hands. But silence has a way of lying, and silence returned thicker than before. Eli Carter felt it first. The hardware store had hired someone new, the fence had been repainted, and people nodded at him now when they passed. But their eyes slid away too quickly, as if looking too long might remind them of who they had been when Lena Brooks was just a missing poster curling in the rain. Investigators from the state arrived with boxes and laptops and polite smiles, reopening files that smelled of dust and old ink. And what they found wasn't a single bad night, but a pattern. Faint at first, like footprints leading into fog. Missing persons reports quietly downgraded. Accidents ruled too fast. Witness statements altered with neat pen strokes. Names repeating in the margins. Developers, donors, council members, men who had all attended the same fundraisers, cut ribbons at the same ceremonies, shaken Victor Hale's hand under flashing cameras. Marissa Cole stayed in town, sleeping in a motel with flickering lights, chasing the past with a patience that made people nervous. She found a waitress who remembered a girl crying in a booth years ago, begging to use the phone because he wouldn't leave her alone. She found a former school counselor who had filed complaints that never made it past the superintendent's desk. She found a river search from a decade earlier that ended just upstream from a private dock. Each story alone sounded like rumor. Together they sounded like design. Victor Hale, still unseen, released statements through lawyers, words scrubbed clean of emotion, insisting the town was being re-traumatized by speculation. But the speculation had weight now, and it pressed down on the courthouse steps where candles burned again. Not just for Lena, but for names people were only beginning to remember. Eli was called to testify before a grand jury, and as he walked past the marble pillars, he felt smaller than ever, a familiar feeling. But this time it didn't stop him. Inside, he told the truth the way he always had, plain, unpolished, unafraid, and when he finished, one of the jurors asked the question that had haunted the town since the stormy night that started it all. Why didn't anyone listen sooner? The answer hung in the air, heavy and obvious, and no one tried to brush it away. Then the power shifted again. A sealed ledger was found in a storage unit registered under a shell company. Payments logged with dates that matched disappearances. Hush money disguised as community outreach. A retired judge. Once a mentor to Victor Halley was named. A police captain resigned and fled the state. The sheriff's resignation turned into charges. The story was no longer about one reckless son. It was about a system that had learned how to erase people quietly. The town square filled not with celebration, but with reckoning. Parents clutched their children tighter. Old friends stopped speaking. Churches held meetings that ran late into the night. And still Victor Hall did not appear. When he finally did, weeks later, it was not at a podium but in handcuffs. Led through a side door, his face older, smaller, stripped of the certainty that once bent the town around him. Justice, when it came, was not loud. It was procedural. It was indictments and dates and motions and evidence laid bare under fluorescent lights. It was Lena Brooks's voice played in a courtroom they could not look away. It was Eli Carter sitting in the back, hands shaking, realizing that being underestimated had been his camouflage, and truth, once spoken, had a way of multiplying. The verdicts would come later, appeals would follow. Power never gives up without a fight. But the town had crossed a line it could not uncross. The cover-up was exposed, the myth shattered, and the silence broken into pieces too sharp to put back together. As the cameras packed up and the crowds thinned, Marissa received a call she didn't expect to tip about another town. Another river, another name that appeared in Victor Hale's old ledger. A place where the past had been buried just as neatly. She looked at Eli, who nodded without being asked, because justice, once awakened, doesn't stop at the first confession. And somewhere beyond the town limits, the truth was still waiting, patient as ever, for someone brave enough to refuse to be quiet again.